Hello. Dobre odpoledne. Hope I got that right. My name's Mark Dunn. I'm a content engineer at Oxford University Press. OUP's been publishing books for over 400 years. For most of that time, I've been helping them to produce digital publications, so online platform and ebooks. This is the first time I've been asked to produce a print output. And I wanted to talk about it because I don't think anyone else is doing this. I don't quite know why, maybe someone can tell me. No AI was used in the presentation of this project. I didn't have time to train an AI to do this for me, and frankly, where's the fun in that anyway? So what are we trying to do? So OUP, amongst many other things, publishes worksheets for students learning English. So these are activities where a student will read a text, look at an image, listen to an audio, and then answer questions about it. And there's lots of different kinds of activities that they're asked to do. And we produce these in print and digital formats. The standard way that these are produced in publishing is to create the content in Microsoft Word and import it into InDesign, which I'll talk a little bit more about. The content authors and the designers work together in InDesign to finalize the content and the layout. And then you can export XML from InDesign. And what that leads to is an XML last workflow with some disadvantages. So your digital product lags some time behind the print. The authors, the content creators, really only think about the print format. They tend not to consider the digital output. And it's quite expensive. InDesign operators are a lot more expensive than XML capture suppliers. At OUP, we don't yet have XML in the workflow, so we've actually got two separate workflows. So we've got the Microsoft Word imported into InDesign, and we've got a separate process for creating the digital product, which is essentially copying the text into an authoring environment on the platform. And we end up with the same kind of disadvantages. We still have a focus mainly on the print format. The digital is still some way behind, and it's still expensive. So what I was asked to do, or to help with, was to produce a single source XML workflow for this content, including a single source for the corrections and updates. So at the moment, we're making any corrections twice because of the two separate workflows. We want to publish them at the same time, and we want to reduce the amount of manual effort in this process and eliminate the duplication that we have right now. And the way that we're doing this is with a transformation, XSLT, from a source XML format, which is QTI, which I'll explain a bit about shortly, into InDesign. So not everyone will be familiar with InDesign. I know I'm still not, but it's an application for typesetting. And the typical way that you work with InDesign, as I've said, you import your content usually from Microsoft Word, but you can import XML as well. You then arrange the content on what are called spreads, more on that in a sec. You apply paragraph and character styles, and when you're happy, you press a button, export a PDF, and that's your print. That's what you print. So there's a couple of bits of jargon that I need to talk about. First one is IDML. So the only reason this process is possible at all is that InDesign has an XML serialization, essentially. And it's actually a zip package of lots of XML files for the different components of the document. Weirdly, it's not the native format that InDesign uses. The native format produces files that are 10 times bigger. Adobe seems to regard IDML only now as an interchange format, so you can save your document in one version of InDesign and open it in a different version. But when the spec was first produced, and I dug up documentation from a random place on the internet, it's not made available by Adobe anymore. But the last spec that they produced publicly encouraged people to do exactly what I'm doing, produce an IDML document from your data source, but nobody seems to be doing it. If you search IDML on Stack Overflow, there's fewer than 200 questions asked about it, and most of them haven't been answered. So I mentioned a spread. A spread is 1 or 2 pages, so designers often think about a double-page spread, like in a magazine. And it's an XML file in the IDML package. In the spread are various kinds of objects. So you can have text frames, more on that in a moment, images, lines, and various kinds of geometric objects, and lots of associated properties that describe how InDesign will present them on the page. There's also a concept called a master spread, which you don't see in your output, but it's kind of a template. So your page that's on an actual spread can inherit its properties from a master spread and get its design from there. So I mentioned text frame. A text frame is an object on a spread. It's like a window onto the content. The content is held separately in a story, more on that in a sec, which is linked to the text frame. And the exciting thing about text frames is that you can chain them together. So if your text frame is too small for the content, you can link it to another one, and the content will overflow into the next one. So that's what this screenshot shows, is there's 2 columns and it's just an overflow. And that's how you do many pages of worksheets and books. So story is where the content is held. In the version of using InDesign that imports XML, you don't see the content straight away. It puts it into another file in the package called a backing story. And you don't see the content straight away. You do see, if you open the structured view, you do see kind of a hierarchy of the XML structure. And then what you do in the manual process is you drag nodes from that onto your page, your spread, and that process creates a text frame, and it snips out the content from the backing story, and it creates a story that's linked to the text frame. So you've now got a window on your spread onto the content that's behind it. At that point, you can start applying your paragraph and character styles. So this is just, I hope that's not too small. It's a hierarchy of the story XML. So in it, you might be able to see that there are paragraph and character style elements. And there's also elements called XML elements and XML attributes. And they're kind of an imprint of the source XML. And this is going to be very important in the process, that we retain this imprint. And I'll explain why shortly. So QTI, again, you might not be familiar with QTI. It's an industry standard model for assessment content. Contains a mixture of presentational elements, which are actually XHTML, and more kind of semantic functional elements for the digital assessment. Lots of different kinds of interaction that are supported. So we're using, for example, multiple choice, text entry, ordering, matching, that sort of thing. We hold our QTI together as a package of, again, separate XML files. So we have a test file, which is linked to, that's the overall worksheet. It's linked to a series of the assessments, which are individual XML files. And there's a manifest in the package that basically describes all the different resources, including the media assets, and has metadata about those. And we use all of the different kinds of files in this process. Just to show you a quick example of what it looks like, in case you miss angle brackets. So you can see, again, hope it's not too small, some HTML markup, div and paragraph and images, and span, and some of the QTI specific things, so the introduction, the rubric block, and the interaction is just an empty element there, which is going to become a write-on line in the print or a text box in the digital format. Oh yeah, at this point in the process, we will normally not have images. We'll know that there are going to be images, so we put in a placeholder, and in the manifest, when we write the metadata about the image, we include what's called a media brief, so a description of what we want the image to look like, and then somebody else goes away and produces it. A bit more QTI, so in a separate part of the activity file, you can identify what the correct response is, and that's linked to the interaction using an ID. Yeah, in the digital environments, the QTI package also contains a thing called a response processing template, which has some fairly clunky logic for scoring the activity. So what parts of this process are we going to automate? So we're going to start with this XML source. We want to automate the import of the XML. We want to automate that process of dragging and dropping the nodes and creating text frames. And we want to automate, at least at the first pass, applying the styles. So there's a mapping between the XML elements, attributes, their values, and particular named styles in the InDesign. In order to do this, one thing we need is a template file. So this is a blank InDesign document that contains the master spreads with the design, the styles that we're going to map to, and text frame placeholders. So we've got a target for where we're going to put our content. And in broad outline, all we do is unzip this template, XSLT the QTI source into stories, starting with the backing story. We include that imprint of the sourse XML, which is very important. We create the spreads and the text frames. We clone the master spreads. There's a few other things we have to tinker with. So IDML has its own manifest called a design map, which references all the different files in the package. So we create a new file, so we have to update the design map. We zip it all up again, and that's the document. This is all executed with an XProc pipeline, and I wanted to credit Akim, who gave me help. Can't see him. With writing and understanding XProc. So we've done all this automation. Technical details are not rocket science, they're in the paper. And we get an output with a few bells and whistles added in the transformation. So there's no numbering in the source XML because we might not need it in the digital output, so the numbering's added. What else? We pull some of the text on the page from the manifest. We don't have images, so we've got a placeholder, and the placeholder's got the media brief. What else? We've got a worked example. And this was identified with a class in the HTML, and we can use that and pull in the response, and so we can show the correct answer for that one example activity. And they're probably too small, but there are footers on the page. Don't need to worry about those. They're just copied from the template master spread. So I think that's quite good. I hand it over to the designer, and he goes, leave it with me. He wants to improve the layout, and that's his job. So he wants to fit the whole thing more nicely on the page. He does various bits of alteration and titivation. So the image placeholders are resized, and we get a nice grid. They're aligned better with the text. And it all looks nice. And then what happens is somebody decides we need to make a change to the content. Maybe there's a typo, curriculum change, all sorts of things can lead to a content change. Now, the typical way of doing this up to now is to work in InDesign. You can edit the content in InDesign. InDesign is not an XML editor, so we've not chosen to go down that path. What we want to do is to update the source XML, single source, so we only have to update it once. It can be updated for the digital as well. And we want to rerun the transformation. But we don't want to reset the layout. We want to preserve what the designer has done in his step. He doesn't want to have to redo that work. So, how we do this? We've now got two sources. We've got the updated source XML. We've got instead of the blank template, we've got the IDML output that's been updated. And this has got the imprint of the source QTI in it. So when we retransform the source QTI, we can look at the IDML story and go, have I got this node already? And if it finds the node, it can also find the designer's work, because all the designer's work, the alignment and whatever, it's attributes and children within this structure. So we can find the node in the IDML and copy the styling overrides so that we preserve them when we produce the new output. So we can change various things. The heading, the media brief, the activity, and the layout's preserved. One more example, because there's a lot of different things you can do in InDesign. So this is a different kind of activity. There's a reading text and multiple choice options. And this one actually looks pretty bad because the reading text is in a text frame. It's too short. It's too long for the text frame, so you're not actually seeing all of the text. And the spacing is a bit weird. So this time we improve it. So this is, I'm obliged to say this is the work of me playing around, not the work of a professional designer. But we make various changes. So we expand the reading text frame so we can see all the text, put a bit of shading. We've added spacing to the heading. We've added some drop caps. We've laid out the answer options on single lines, so it looks a bit nicer. And again, we can preserve we can change text all over the place here and preserve the layout. So the heading can change, the paragraphs can change, fixed my typo, reordered the answers. It still works. Okay, how are we doing? So the next thing we wanted to do is to add images. So we've got the image now. It can be added as an asset to the QTI package. We can add a reference to the file, so before and after, just add a file reference. And okay, job done. No, hang on, it went wrong. What I didn't take account of when I first did the process is that there's basically a big array of numbers in InDesign that tell you how to do the image. If you don't do anything specific to the image, it'll just plonk it on the page, add its original size at a location that is relative to the original site of the text frame. So the text frame has been moved and it's been resized. So the image is now in the wrong place and it's the wrong size. So you have to do a big calculation. It's not entirely trivial on the numbers to scale the image and center it and position it correctly. There was one, I skipped over a thing that I was going to say actually. I think I've got time. Sorry to go back. When I first produced this output, I didn't get the media brief. I got empty text boxes, text frames. And I could look at the IDML and go, well, the text is there in a story, and the story's linked to the text frame, but I'm not seeing it. So I had to go away and have an existential crisis for a day or two, and eventually had a bit of a brute force attack at it. And it turned out, maybe this is why nobody else is doing this, it turned out that there's multiple stories going on here. So there's a story containing the activity text, and there are separate stories with the media brief. And in the design map, which has references to all of these stories, it turns out, the documentation doesn't tell you, that the order of the stories is important. So my story with the activity text had to come before the story with the media brief. Don't know why. Once I reordered it, got the output. Okay. And now I can't go forward again. Nope, it's gone. Why can't I go forward? Okay. Images. So that's more or less it. There's lots more to do. This is essentially a proof of concept. We've done 10 of our activity types. There's a lot more to do. We need to do boring things like figure out how to manage the content and the assets. One thing I'd like to do is transform marks. So the content's still created in Word. I would like to write a transformation from the Word to the QTI. At the moment, we assume that an outsourced capture house will do it for us. What we're definitely going to do is extend this to books. So in the bits data model, transform that to InDesign. And our content creators are in-house. I would like them to be confident in editing XML. So I want to write an authoring framework with a bit of Schematron Quick Fix. I've been desperate to use Schematron Quick Fix for years. Haven't had an excuse to do it. This is pending the availability of a proper designer to create a nice-looking authoring framework. So finally, I think the key insights I had from this project. One was there's an in-industry standard model for assessments. Let's use it, not reinvent the wheel. There's a serialization in XML for InDesign, which is good. Couldn't have done it without that. We want to mimic as closely as possible in the transformation the way InDesign works in terms of importing XML and placing the text. The logic was a lot easier when doing that. We have to retain the imprint of the source XML in the IDML stories so that we can do the update process. And to avoid hideous complications, our our updates processes, content XML, content updates in the XML, layout updates in InDesign, merge the two. So what I didn't say, I meant to say, was that OUP's had a couple of attempts before now at doing this, and both got bogged down because one, they tried to use a bespoke data model, which was just trying to hit a moving target, and the logic around the transformation was very complicated, and they also got bogged down in trying to round trip. So they thought they could update the content in InDesign and export the XML, and that could be your master XML for the digital. It didn't work. So I tried to keep it simple, and it works. And that's me. Any questions?
Thank you very much. We have maybe 1 minute for one question. Sure.
Hello. I just want to suggest another next step for you. The server version of InDesign has a JavaScript interface so that you can automatically create master spreads and populate them with XML content.
I'll make a note. JavaScript server version. Thank you.
Hello, Mark.
Hi, Tom.
First of all, congratulations. Print from XML First is a dream from when I was with you at OUP, and I'm really pleased to see you achieve it. My question is, how difficult is it to separate the content updates from the layout updates? And is there some fuzziness around the two, and how do you manage that?
That is a really good question. So one of the reasons you might make a content update is you look at it on the page and you think, oh, it's too short or it overruns. So you want to remove or add a few words just so it fills the page nicely. And if you're doing that in the source XML, then you can't. It's a while before you see it. I mean, it's a button press in Oxygen to run the XProc, but it's still not what people intuitively want to do. So we've come up with various bits of guidance around operating this process. And one is, well, you can update text in InDesign if you want to preview your changes, but you still need to make it in the QTI. So it is a bit fuzzy, and if I was a creator of that content, I'd think it was still duplication because you're doing it in InDesign and then you're doing it in the QTI. We haven't got a neat way around it, but for typos and stuff, it's fairly straightforward just to update the XML and press the button, get the new output.
Okay, one last quick question.
Yeah, in Latin they say that the venom is in the tail. To me it seems that's in the head. If I look at one of your last slides, you mention your authors and editors. And I wonder what they feel about this. Especially when your editors are employed by you, but your authors are often external. And well, how do they feel about this? Because normal people outside of this room tend to not to overly like XML.
True. So right now the authors are working in Word and then in InDesign. And the first step in socializing this is getting them to relinquish a little bit of control. So we say, well, you can create the word. We're gonna hand it out to some place in Asia, and they're going to create XML from it. And we'll check it. It'll look fine. That's a hurdle we have to get over because they lose a bit of control at that point. And when they want a correction, well, they can specify what the correction is, but they can't make it. Somebody else has to go and make it. Thank you. someone else has to go and make it. So I think authors being in-house. How's it gone?
Keep going, keep going.
Sorry.
We're streaming.
I didn't
We're
press.
streaming.
I didn't press the button. Authors being in-house can be trained, and they're less reluctant than authors who are not employed by the press to use XML. They're more willing to say, okay, to be persuaded that they can use an authoring tool. It's not easy, but it's more easy with in-house people who you pay than with
Where should I put
external authors.
Where? Do you have some pocket? No, yeah, on the side. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again.